Somontano is a viticulture area which is in northeast of Spain, very near of the French border, more or less 1 hour by car from France. It's a very tiny area because in Somontano we have about 4,000 hectares. Enate, our estate, we cultivate about 550 hectares. So comparing with the 80,000 in Bordeaux or more or less the same in Rioja, we are one of the smallest areas in Spain. Of course, this location with the influence of the Pyrenees give us special characteristics for climate. There is a refreshing river breeze that affects our climate and prevents frost damage, for example, during the spring, and also is responsible for a high diurnal swing between night and day.
Right.
Usually during the summer, temperatures are about 35 degrees Celsius during the day in August and July, but by night temperatures falls down till 10, 12, 13 degrees Celsius. So it's more or less 20 degrees, which is amazing for taking care of the acidity in the grapes. I'm always focused on fruit-driven wines with crispy acidity, and for that it's quite important not burning the malic acid or the tartaric acid during the ripeness process. In this area, we are more or less 28, 30 bodegas, cellars.
Okay.
There are.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I was just saying it's a very small appellation compared to a lot of the more well-known regions.
Yeah. Yeah, we are in a region, for those who knows a little bit more Spain. In Spain, there are about 50 different viticulture areas, and Enate in Somontano is located in one region which is called Aragon. And in Aragon we have Calatayud with very good garnachas.
Right.
Also Cariñena, which is very well known because the name of the region is the same as the grape, Cariñena, which is in Zaragoza, the main city in our region. Zaragoza is about 100 kilometers from here, from Enate. And the fourth wine region is Campo de Borja, also with amazing garnachas. Enate, by the way, the name of our brand, of our state, is the name of a very, very small village which is called Enate, and that's why we choose at those times the name of Enate for the brand, because the first plantations made in the 90s were done there in Enate. In fact, we were born with the vintage 92. So this vintage 21 has been the 30th in our short history.
Wow.
I say short history because, as you probably know, having just 30 vintages for a winery is nothing. Here in Oman and in Spain, there are wineries of more than 100 years.
Right.
I always say that, yeah, Enate has no history, but we have big future, or at least we hope we will have a big future. This is a fantastic photo of the single vineyard called 234, which is also the name from which we have a white wine called Enate Chardonnay 234.
Right.
This is perhaps one of our flagships in the bodega. It's a wine that we released for the first time in '96 after 4 years working and knowing more the region. And nowadays is the wine we taste the success very soon also with this wine. And this wine has improved a lot our image as good grape growers of white grapes. That's the bottle of Chardonnay 234. It's a young Chardonnay, crispy with acidity, also with aromas of fennel and green apple, those aromas. But it's not a young wine pure. I mean, it's a wine that can't age. In fact, the first vintage was 96, but the label, well, all the labels, you see the label of the 234, are made by the famous artists. This one of 234 is made by Pepe Cerdá, a very famous painter in Spain. And Pepe made the label, the picture, in July 97. Okay. So that means that the first vintage of the 234, 96, was released 1 year after the vintage, the pickup of the grapes. That means also that the wine has aging potential, not aging potential to stay 10 years in the bottle, but yes, 2, 3, 4 years, the wine develops more fennel aromas, more honey aromas, more balsamic notes that impairs more complexity and also more mouth feeling for the wine.
It's definitely one of our flagships, and we have a lot of fans of the Chardonnay 234. It's exceptional year after year. I was hoping to back up just a few moments and to hear a bit about your history. How did you start in the wine industry, and how did you wind up working with Enate?
Well, I was born in Zaragoza, and I studied first chemistry. But, you know, in Spain, there is a very deep root tradition of drinking wine during the meal. So I have been always in contact with wine, also helping my grandfather, who was a beekeeper and also a grape grower. Since I was 6, 8 years in the 60s and beginning of the 70s, I helped him for the vineyards. And well, after studying chemistry, I fell in love with a French, beautiful French girl from Bordeaux.
That'll happen.
Yeah. And you know, I'm talking about 1980. Yeah, 1981. Right. At those times, there was no smartphones, there was no internet, there was no all the communications that we have today. So it was not easy to keep in contact both. Bordeaux is, well, look, when I was from Zaragoza, where I live, to Bordeaux, this is 600 kilometers, more or less.
Wow, that's far, yeah.
I had no car at those times, so I went by train to Bordeaux. And I remember quite well, we took the train at 2 a.m. and I arrived to Bordeaux at 2 p.m. Oh 12 hours to do that. And well, so I decided to go to Bordeaux to study enology and also to share our love with Enate.
That was a good decision. I think it worked out.
So I spent near 3 years in France studying and also working. I had the opportunity to work with Paul Pontalier in Chateau Margaux, and also in Hennessy, and you know, Hennessy de Cognac.
Yeah, sure.
Because I always love all the distillery methods. But unfortunately, on September 86, my father passed away, and that was a shock for the family. And I decided to come back to Spain to be with my family, with my mother and my sister. In '86, so I wrote to Miguel Torres to have an opportunity to work with him, and he accepted my proposal. And I spent with Miguel Torres, you know, famous and big winery, a fantastic winery in North Spain, Catalonia. I spent 6 years and a half. It was perhaps one of the best schools I have in my life. One school was Bordeaux, of course, the University of Bordeaux. Second was Miguel Torres in Catalonia. And the third school has been Enate, because during these 30 years, we have learned a lot. We have taken a lot of experience. And well, I always say this is really a privilege to be here since the beginning. So that's my short history before working in Enate.
Well, congratulations to you and to Enate. I mean, working with Enate since the beginning, since 1992, it's an amazing accomplishment and all you've accomplished. I'd like to hear a bit more about the terroir of the region. What makes this area specific and special as compared to some of your neighbors? How is it different?
Yeah, well, this is a very small area, but we have a great diversity of soils. For example, in 234 Vineyard, the soils has a high content of sand. You know that sandy soils have lower water holding capacity.
Right.
So the drainage is much better than in clay soils. Here around the winery, we are in a small village called Salas Bajas, the winery. When I say small village, I'm talking about 100 people living in this area. Well, we are in our province, in Huesca. This is a province, one of the largest provinces in Spain, but we are just 220,000 people living there. So density of population is about 12 people per square kilometer.
Wow.
So in Enate, in Salas Bajas, the soils are clay, so you know, more water capacity to retain the humidity. And we have also nearly half an hour of Enate, of winery, another vineyard. We have there 200 hectares with more calcareous characteristics, and the roots diving into the soil with calcareous prevents lose acidity. You know, always calcareous retains acidity. Clay is the best for retaining water when you have no rainfall, and sand is good to have fresh soils with less water. For example, sandy soils,
right,
and also stony soils are perfect here for Cabernet Sauvignon to avoid bitterness, to avoid the methoxypyrazines that have this green character that is unpleasant for majority of consumers.
Right. And you were speaking before, you have a large shift in temperatures, but you also have a lot of rain. How does that, and a lot of snow melt from the Pyrenees, right? So you have a lot of water, which is a benefit, I would think, compared to a lot of regions in Spain.
No, the average rainfall here is about 500 meters, more or less. But you know, it changes from year to year. For example, usually we begin harvest about 25th August, usually. But a hot year like 2003, we began 9 August. 20, for those who know, yeah, it's great. But 2003 in Champagne, in France, they began the 18th August. It's a record for those also. So, and for example, on 2013 was very cold winter, very cold spring, not summer, not hot summer like usually it is here. In 13, we began the 10th September, so 1 month later than in 2003. So here we have a big diurnal swing between day and night, but also depending on years. It's because the influence of the Pyrenees. In the Pyrenees, we have mountains up more than 3,000 meters. We receive all those wines, all this snow in water. So we have plenty of water, plenty of richness that compares to the wines. Yeah.
Right. And speak to us a bit about the vineyard management. I know you have a big focus in sustainability. So if you could speak a bit about that in the vineyard management, I know low yields is a focus.
Yeah.
Tell us just a bit about that, if you would.
Well, here we don't work today like we worked 30 years ago, of course. We have learned, of course. And nowadays, for example, canopy management has been important since the beginning. And depending on the grapes, you have to maintain a good balance between sunlight exposure and fruit shading. Of course, you know that the grapes get ripe because of the sun. So sunlight is completely necessary. But in regions like here, where you reach 35 degrees during the day in August, you have also to prevent sunburn or desiccation of the grapes. Because if sunburn, when there is a heat spike, arrives in the vineyard, it arrives in the grapes, you cannot balance with irrigation. Once the grapes are shriveled, you are completely lost. You cannot come back by irrigation. So, well, important the canopy management. We have vineyards with open vegetation to have more sunlight exposure, also to have more air coming into the grapes. Example, Cabernet Sauvignon. The Cabernet needs here sun, need air to prevent vegetables aromas. And for other grapes like Chardonnay, we prefer vertical shoot positioning, VSP. This is also very used in the United States because like that the vegetation is vertical and you prevent the sunburn direct into the grapes. So we adapt ourselves in function of the site-specific vineyards. There are not only the climate, but there is the slope, there is the tree shading. There are many factors that are specific site, and we play with our experience and also with the tools that nature give us. The soil is important. We talked a little bit about the soil some minutes ago, and the climate perhaps is the third most important factor for quality of the wines. Handling, vinification, the human factor will be another important factor, because depending on how you work, how are your strategies to vinify different grapes, you can modify the sensory profile of your wines.
Sure. So
also, there is another point perhaps which is interesting for those who are watching the video, is that the vine spacing here in Spain usually is the density is about 2,500 plants per hectare.
okay.
But here we have this vine spacing, and in 2000 we plant other vineyards. We have a lot of hectares of those vineyards with narrowed wine spacing, meaning that we reach 4,000 vines per hectare.
Wow.
That way you have more shadow in the earth to prevent evaporation of water. You have also less crop per vine for the same quantity in an hectare, and you have also a better root penetration in the soil, because more plants mean that the roots need to go deeper to find nutrients, to find water. Another important point, talking about canopy management, about vegetation is that in the last 4 or 5 years, we began to work with cover grass, cover crops, in order to prevent soil compaction, in order to prevent erosion, and also to improve biodiversity and to improve healthy earthworm population. You know that the earthworms are perhaps the best tillers because they make air pores to let drain the water and also to let the air come through.
Right.
So there are, you know, I always say, when you know nothing about one thing, you are happy. Once you begin to learn, you have problems. Adapt each category of strategy to soil, to climate is not easy, but it's something amazing. It's perhaps the best thing we have in our winemaking process. That's the most interesting thing we have in life for us.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, once you start learning, then it's never ending, which is part of the fun and part of the challenge.
I always tell the people, for example, when you are studying enology, you're a student and you begin to work, and you arrive to a winery and you say, okay, we need to buy barrels for aging. Okay, okay, I need 100 barrels. You go to buy 100 barrels, but the cooper asks you, okay, with which capacity of the barrel? You want 250 or 200 or 300 liters?
Right.
Which kind of oak you need? French or American wood? Yeah, I want French. Okay, French wood. From which regions? Nevers, Limousin, Vosges. Each region has different varieties of oak, and also different spacing between oaks. So different grain. Besides that, okay, you need barrels. You need the stakes split or sewn. You need the stakes medium, light, or even the toasting. I mean, when you make the stakes to give this shape to the barrel, how long you want to toast the stakes. There are plenty of things that you have to write to explain your specific characteristic for your barrel. So if you know nothing, you are happy. You know, 100 barrels, point.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it's so complicated, and people don't realize every step has so many decisions behind it. So before we run out of time, I do want to go back and speak a bit more specifically about a few of the wines. So let's go back to the Chardonnay, the 234, which is so popular. Tell us just a bit about the production. So we talked about the style, but is it aged in oak at all? Does it go through malolactic? Tell us just a bit about how it's produced.
Well, Chardonnay 234 comes from a single vineyard, a large single vineyard called 234.
Okay.
This is a pure Chardonnay that we pick up in several days because the vineyard is large. So the first grapes have more aromas of lemon peel, green apple. The grapes that we pick up at the end have more peach, more apricot aromas. The whole blend is a great mixture of those aromas, giving more complexity to the wine. The wine is picked up before sunrise to have lower berry temperature, which is important for settling the juice and let a good debourbage to eliminate the lees. After that, fermentation takes place. We have a high-tech winery, I mean, with with amazing systems to control temperature during fermentation. You know, most of you know that the fermentation, sorry, is an exothermic reaction. Fermentation comes from Latin, comes from a word called fervere. Fervere in Latin means boiling. My grandfather spoke about my wines are boiling. He said, no, my wines are fermented. In Spain, the grandfathers, all of them talk about that. Huh. Nowadays, we know that the wines are not boiling. This is a fermentation, but the fermentation produces heat during the transformation of sugar into alcohol. And this heat, these calories, we have to give back to prevent spikes, you know. And the fermentation for 234 usually is about 16, 17 Celsius degrees. After that, we find the wine with bentonite that comes from Wyoming, you know, for Benton. That's the name, that's the origin of the name of bentonite. It was discovered in Fort Benton in Wyoming. And after that, we bottle the wine, well, in November. We are going to bottle the 234 2021 in 10 days' time. Okay. So no oak, no malolactic fermentation. We have another Chardonnay, which is barrel fermented and also undergoes malolactic fermentation. Of course, malolactic fermentation produces a completely different profile because when lactic bacteria transform the malic acid into lactic acid, you have more aromas, more buttery character, butterscotch, those aromas of caramel, which add complexity to the wine. But in 234, we prefer to keep acidity, to keep this crispy character, and also, as it is a young wine, the 234 contains about 800 milligrams per liter of CO2, the gas of fermentation. And CO2 is a gas, but in an aqueous solution like wine, it converts into an acid, the carbonic acid. And carbonic acid gives more nervosity, more, you know, more acidity to the wine because it's an acid. It's not a strong acid, but gives more freshness to the mouth feeling. So we prefer not to do the malolactic fermentation in 234 and keep the acidity and the freshness. It's a wine, as I tell you some minutes ago, that it is young, but some people prefer drinking 234 after 1 year, 2 years, depending on the consumers. What's the appeal of 234? I think people it's a very approachable wine. It's an easy wine, and I don't find people that tell me I don't like the 234. Perhaps there are people that love a lot and others a little bit less, but it's always the right horse. It's a wine for those who wants to bet on the right horse. Right.
Yeah, it's very approachable and definitely one of our most popular. I wanted to move to the Crianza. We had a question come across. It's aged in French oak. Well, it's aged in a variety of different oaks for 8 to 9 months or 9 to 10 months.
Yeah, Crianza. Yeah, sorry. The Crianza is a wine that we have made since the beginning, since '92. We are a winery focused on international varieties, as you know. Right. We have Cabernet, we have Chardonnay, we have Straviner, Syrah. So, and in the beginning we said, okay, we need a wine with the Tempranillo variety. For those who don't speak Spanish, Tempranillo comes from a word that is temprano. Temprano in Spanish means soon. And why Tempranillo? Because Tempranillo is one of the first grapes to mature, to ripen. And that's why the people talk Tempranillo. So Tempranillo is perhaps the Spanish variety, red winemaking. And crianza contains usually 70%, 65, 70% Tempranillo. This is a soft and flattering grade here in Somontano. We are 400 meters in altitude. We are not at 1,000 meters like in Rioja, in Ribera del Duero, or 700 in Rioja. So here at those altitude, Tempranillo is softer. It has less structure than in those regions. So the wine needs more tannic structure, right. And we have this strength, this powerful, thanks to 30% of Cabernet Sauvignon that also is in Tempranillo. Of course, Tempranillo is a grape that prefers clay soils with good water retention. And as I said some minutes ago, Cabernet prefers ventilated areas with less water, with more air ventilation. We harvest at different times. First is Tempranillo, it's temprano soon, is the first day we pick up, and after Cabernet. So fermentation takes place in different tanks. We have also a high-tech pumping over system that makes this pumping over when we want, and we can program at which time and how many times a day we do this process. And after fermentation, that takes place about 24, 25 degrees Celsius, the wine goes undergo malolactic fermentation in the same tanks, and after we put in barrels. For Tempranillo, we prefer the American wood. American wood, you know, comes from Quercus alba, which is a different spice, different kind than French. Quercus alba is richer in vanilla and also in gamma-methyl lactone, which smells like coconut, and is also lower in tannins comparing to French barrels. And for Cabernet, which has more tannins, which has more structure, we prefer French oak from center of France, the area of Nevers. So we have there we have more phenols, we have more eugenol that smells cloves. We have more, how you say, aromas of album, you know. And I think it's a good marriage. Tempranillo Cabernet, Tempranillo American wood, Cabernet French. Well, the whole wine is a very flattering wine. It's a wine that is affordable. It has a good mouth-feeling sensation.
It's delicious, and we are fortunate that we have our current vintage is 2015, so it has already some bottle age to it. So it's very approachable and extremely food friendly. It's one of my favorite food pairing wines, especially with braised meats. We had a question come across about this one specifically. So it's aged in oak for 9 to 10 months, and then back to stainless steel. How long is it kept in stainless steel before bottling?
You mean how long is it stay after barrels? You mean?
Yes.
Well, after barrels, the wines goes to tanks, and that's made usually now in November, December. Okay. To take profit of the winter. So there is a kind of stabilization for cold crystals, for vital traits, that it is made in the same tanks. You remove all those solids, all those crystals of vital traits, and perhaps it's 3 months usually that the wine stays in the tanks, and after the tanks we find the wine with a little bit of bentonite also, just to remove the proteins that can be in the wine. In red wines there are less proteins than in white wines, because as you probably know, one of the main differences between white and red wines is the content of tannins. And we know, all of us, that tannins bind proteins. And this is the sensation we have in the mouth when we drink wine. The tannins of the red wine binds our salivary proteins and precipitate these proteins. And we have this sensation of astringency, of bitterness, of, well, sometimes harsh tannins. In white wines, there are no tannins or very low quantity, so we don't have this problem. So for finding white wines, we need bentonite, which bind proteins. For red wines, the self-tannins of the red wine bind the proteins. And after fining, we bottle the wine. So this Crianza 15 has been bottled more or less in March, April 2017. Okay. So now it's nearly 4 years and a half in bottle, which is a fantastic moment to enjoy the wine. Crianza is drinkable when we release. Right. Now in Spain we have released 2017, but you can find also 16 and 15 like USA, which are in the what we call it in Spain, in Spanish, la flor de la vida, the best moment in your life, the flower of your life. Right?
And it's amazing for a customer, but it's especially in a restaurant. I find it to be just fantastic to have a wine that's been in bottle for 5 years. It's a great experience. Sure. And we're running out of time, but I did want you to speak just for a few moments about the Reserva, just because it's special, but also unique, being 100% Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yeah. You know, why we have decided to release a pure Reserva? Because here in Spain, I think I have talked about that this morning or some minutes ago here, people say, oh, it's very difficult to vinify, to produce grapes, to do a pure wine of Cabernet, because this character of green pepper or green coffee. Okay, perhaps in Bordeaux, with an Atlantic climate, that's a problem. But we are not in Bordeaux. We are 600 kilometers lower and with more Mediterranean influence, because we are at 2 hours of Barcelona, 2 hours of the coast. So here we have another climate, and here Cabernet has sunlight exposure. This is very important. If you have sunlight in Cabernet, you have stony soils, sandy soils with good drainage, and you have a good canopy management of your vineyards, you can pick up fantastic grapes of Cabernet Sauvignon. We do that, and after, of course, the vinification is slightly different from Tempranillo, because Tempranillo lacks a little bit of structure. Cabernet has a lot of structure.
Right.
It's also important for Cabernet here in these regions to make what I call extended hand time. I mean, you go to the vineyard and you say, yeah, the grape is nearly ripened, but I'm going to wait 1 day more, 2 days more, just to have also the back part of the grape, of the bunch also ripened. Once you pick up, we make a little bit of cold soaking, skin contact, 2 days, and not a very low temperatures, just 12, 14 degrees Celsius. And with that, you extract anthocyanins. I mean, anthocyanins are the compounds responsible of the red color in red wines. Anthocyanins are more soluble in water than in alcohol. So you get the anthocyanins in the beginning with no fermentation at all. Once the fermentation begins, there is alcohol, more and more alcohol, and anthocyanins are difficult to extract. With alcohol, you extract more tannins, and that's why it's important to reduce the number of pumping overs. For those who doesn't know, pumping over means taking wine from the bottom of the tank and sending the wine to the top, and thanks to an irrigator, you have you put the wine into the cup, right? This is a very famous cap system.
Yeah.
So less pumping overs, and in the beginning we did macerations of 4 weeks for Cabernet. Today, our Cabernet maximum is 3 weeks, 20, and usually is within 15, 20 days. Not, I prefer, as I told you before, I am more focused on fruit driving wines than of very strong wines. I prefer elegant wines, have more texture, finesse. That's, I think, what the people are waiting for our wines.
Absolutely.
And after that, after fermentation, of course, the wine also undergo the malolactic fermentation, and we send the wine into barrels. It's important because Cabernet Sauvignon of the Reserva goes in new barrels, but not new in reality, because once we have rack the barrel fermented Chardonnay, our Chardonnay barrel fermented, we rack the wines, the barrel Chardonnay about March, April.
Okay.
There we put the Cabernet from the Reserva into the barrels without cleaning, because once, many years ago, we were cleaning the barrel to remove, 1 liter of white wine with solids, and I said, wow, the smell was fantastic, amazing. Vanilla, coconut, caramel, coffee, toasting aromas, great. And I said, we are putting away 1 liter of those. No, we have to keep it. And,
wow.
And nowadays, we use new barrels, French barrels, but barrels that have been used for Chardonnay barrel fermented. And in those barrels, the wine, the Cabernet, stays for 1 year, 30 months, depending on the vintages. We are not, in Spain, there is a system of wines that is crianza, reserva, and crianza should be 6 months minimum in barrels, reserva minimum 1 year. Well, I'm not very focused on those times. Which is important is not to keep the wine for 6 months in barrel. Which is important is to have a right balance between fruity, vanilla, and toast aromas. And for that is the winemaker, it's my team, it's our people. We decide which is the best time to take out the wine from the barrel. Usually, our wines, for example, crianza, stays 9 months in barrels, more than the 6 months that the law is required. Right. And Cabernet Reserva stays between 12, 14 months, depending on the vintages.
Well, it's been really insightful for us to listen to you, Jesus. I wish we had more time. Is the only trouble. we always run out of time. But it's I find that Reserva fascinating. I didn't know that about the Chardonnay using the leftover or the first use in Chardonnay fermentation before the Cabernet was added to it. That's really fascinating. I never heard of anyone doing that. But
I think we are. This is, sometimes people ask me, when you get your ideas for making wines, you get your ideas working. If you are on the beach, the ideas perhaps come, but when you are working, you smell, you see things that if you are on an office, you don't see. Well, sometimes you get wrong, but sometimes you get good ideas like this one. It's an amazing strategy to have more complexity to the wine. You lose a little bit of course, because there is 1 liter, 1.5 liters of white wine, but Cabernet has so deep color that this is not important.
No, it's amazing. And what we love about your wines is the balance, and that's the balance, the complexity, the freshness. It's everything is just in balance, and you really have a special region. And unfortunately, we have to end it there today. We've gone over time, but again, Jesus, I just want to thank you for everything. Keep up the amazing work. 30 years at Enate. It's really impressive.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure to share with you some minutes. well, talking about that is really a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time and for your interest in, for trusting Enate, which is important for us also. Thank you very much, David.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we'll get to visit you in person sometime soon, but for now we'll sign off. Thank you for everything and have a great evening.
Okay, you too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.